This is CJ Costabile, and you're listening to Pro Lacrosse Talk.
On Schreiber. Sidearm whip, scores!
Now in front, Fidel scores! Paul Rabel splits two and scores!
Kylie O'Miller showing off those shifty skills.
Kelly, not shy, bounces one home! What a start!
Welcome to Pro Lacrosse Talk, the voice of Pro Lacrosse. I'm Hutton, he's Adam, and together we're bringing you interviews with your favorite players and coaches, as well as news from all 4 professional lacrosse leagues. I'm here with CJ Costabile, long stick midfielder with the Chesapeake Bayhawks and 2019 MLL champion. CJ, welcome to the show.
I appreciate you guys for having me.
So CJ, you're a native of New Fairfield, Connecticut. When did you first pick up your stick, and at one point did you start playing long pole as well as facing off?
So I started playing lacrosse actually in 4th grade. So I was very, very fortunate where my parents were kind of my brother and I's chauffeur, and they would let us play any sport under the sun. So we were playing hockey, we were playing football, we were playing soccer, and then also baseball. So, a lot of sports that we were playing all kind of have a unique feature where they're kind of fast-paced and moving, except for baseball. And it's funny because, there's a big difference between when you go from the pitching machine to all of a sudden kids actually pitching, right? Mm-hmm. Where all of a sudden these baseball games all of a sudden go for 3 hours long because kids can't hit the strike zone. Mm-hmm. So unless you're playing pitcher or you're just playing catcher, it's a very, very boring game, and I don't really have the attention span for it. So it was funny because it just so happened that one of my neighbors, we were actually living in Brewster, in New York at the time. He was actually the head coach of Yorktown High School, and he always used to tell my dad, like, you guys got to, my dad's name's Steve. Like, Steve, you got to get the guys, kids into lacrosse. He's like, they're not going to play with that. What is that? A fish net, a butterfly net on the top of that thing or whatever. And so we never really did it. And then I was like sitting there, I'm like, Dad, like, I can't do this baseball thing anymore. Like, let's try something. So it's funny. So my first lacrosse experience was the Brewster lacrosse camp. So Brewster's a town right over from New Fairfield, and did it. And honestly, I fell in love with the sport. It was kind of everything I wanted because you had this combination of all these other sports, compacted one with like hockey, basketball, and a lot of elements of football, kind of all really tied into it. And, played in 4th grade, fell in love with it, kind of ran with it. And then, in terms of kind of doing the long pole aspect of it, I ended up getting a long pole in 5th grade. So it was a 5-foot stick though. And then gradually, because initially I was trying to play with a 6-foot pole, and I was tripping over it because I was a small 6-foot pole. So I ended up grabbing a 5-foot pole, did that for about a year. Then in 6th grade I was running around with a 6-foot pole. And when it comes to face-offs, actually doing it competitively, I didn't start until probably in high school actually, just because there's just no one that else could take them. So it was just kind of like, hey, tag it, CJ, you're it. I'll get at the X. And by no means did I ever think that was kind of my role. I never really enjoyed taking face-offs. Face-offs are it's a daunting on the body, especially at the collegiate level, where, back when I took face-offs, it was very much more, I tell folks it's much more about willpower, if that makes sense. Meaning that, there was no like setting the ball, guys make sure their sticks are parallel, perpendicular. It was just a dogfight where everyone rolled into the whistle. It was a set whistle right into it, and it was just a free for all. And it was just kind of a matter of willpower. But fortunately, I've had some good moments taking some face-offs, but not necessarily my favorite or fondest memories are at participating in that part of the game. At least wing's fun, don't get me wrong. But the draws at X could be a little wear and tear on the body, so to speak.
So you kind of talked about growing up playing the game, and you were able to use your skill set and go play at Duke. What ultimately led you to deciding to play for Coach Danowski and the Blue Devils? The
beauty of it was just very fortunate, and again, I think a lot of guys look at lacrosse is that lacrosse affords you the ability to, a lot of the top lacrosse programs are top academic institutions. Sure. So when I was going through the process, my top 4 in terms of my choices ended up being Duke, Notre Dame, Princeton, and Georgetown. Okay. And, when you look at it, you look at a couple of elements here, right? So for me, lacrosse was definitely the focal point in the sense that I wanted to play against the best competition in the world. And what that meant at the collegiate level was playing the ACC.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in New Fairfield, Connecticut, playing lacrosse. New Fairfield really, my group of friends and I, we were the first real group to go through the youth program and actually fortunate enough to win a state championship, Class S, my senior year, which is kind of a cool experience. But at the same time as playing Connecticut lacrosse, I was never really kind of a part of that Connecticut crew, right? Because I wasn't from Greenwich, I wasn't from Wilton, New Canaan, or Darien. And, I always had this kind of chip on my shoulder where I wanted to always play with the best because I wanted to prove myself against the best. Mm-hmm. I played in something called the SWC, which is Southwest Conference Lacrosse. Not the most competitive league, to say the least. I enjoyed playing high school. I got to play with my friends. But in terms of my development or my ability, it wasn't like I was playing against the top-tier programs from Long Island or Maryland, what have you. So I always wanted to prove. So the step one was find a program where I was able to compete for a national championship. The second aspect you look at is going to be, academics. The fortunate reality is that there's no, $1 million contract in, the professional lacrosse rankings. And, that commercial where, NCAA athletes are going to go pro something other than sports is pretty prolific in the sport of lacrosse.
Mm-hmm.
And, I wanted to go to a school that was a top 10 academic institution. And to me, Duke fit that, being kind of, in the top 10, where I was going to be able to, not only to challenge myself athletically, but also academically as well. And then, the last element you got to really look at is the social aspect. And I think this and it's tough, especially within early recruiting now, is the fact that you really need to get along with the guys on the team. Like, do you fit with the other, say, call it 39 individuals? Because you have to have this understanding that you're going to live with these guys. You're going to go out with them. You're going to eat with them. You're going to go to class with them. You're going to go to practice with them. So if you do not feel that you fit within the culture of that team, that's going to be, make your life very tough for 4 years. And it's funny because I remember the first time I visited Duke was when my parents and I was during one of my winter breaks, and we were doing the kind of the traveling road show of college visits for CJ. And, so I remember we went to Loyola, I remember we went to Georgetown, I remember going to Maryland, I remember going to Hopkins, and Duke was actually the last stop. And I ended up ultimately doing it overnight. And just something about the air there, but what really sold me was the guys. Just the want and desire to excel in all aspects of life is what's really sold me on the school, and which is ultimately why I ended up deciding to commit there.
Mm-hmm.
Which took place in June of my junior year, which was actually on the earlier side in the recruiting process. Actually the earliest person my year that committed was Steele Stanwyck, who committed September or October of his junior year, which obviously the landscape has changed is much different than today, where you have, freshmen, if not even eighth graders committing at this point. So, but those are kind of the main three reasons why, how I looked at it.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's kind of taking a whole comprehensive approach to it. And, and you certainly excelled when you were at Duke. You recorded 376 ground balls, 67 caused turnovers, and, you kind of proved your versatility too, scoring 22 goals and 20 assists and having a 53% faceoff percentage at the end of it. You're a USILA All-American and a national champion in 2010, which we'll talk about a little bit after this, but you really transformed that LSM position, not only just being a fourth defender on the field, but a threat to score. You talked about it a little bit in high school, but did you kind of get free range from Coach Danowski when you were at Duke to kind of, push it in transition?
Yeah, listen, I think that's definitely evident. Thank God he didn't call a timeout in 2010 on me.
Yeah.
But, again, I think that was always my biggest asset in terms of my versatility. I told you, if they ever went to an OT Braveheart, I think I was kind of the quintessential perfect person for that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
If there's ever a Braveheart tournament where thing is, just trying to work on all aspects of the game. The thing is, I played a lot of different sports, but I always had a lacrosse stick in my hand in some capacity when I was playing football or even in the winter, I was playing hockey, and like, you know, I loved all aspects of it. Have the ability to play alongside the committee, and like I always enjoyed in between the line stuff, right? We all think about lacrosse, like the fun action really happens in between the lines. Like, you know, lacrosse fans, what they love to see is odd man situations, right? It's very simple, but at the same time, it's just very, I don't think majestic's the right word, but at the same time, it's like that's where kind of the excitement comes into play. So if you're able to, you know, kind of wreak havoc and, you know, inflict some damage and pain in somebody's life, take the ball away, and then on top of it, inflicting more damage by putting the ball in the back of the net to help your team win, like, I don't know. I kind of got a kick out of that, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just trying to be a student of the game as much as possible, and just, you know, doing anything possible to allow your team to win. You know, that to me is where, you know, you just got to kind of, sometimes you just got to step up. You know, I look at, you know, my, like, face-offs wise, like, I did it because that's what was required of me to do it. You know, that's kind of, I think I'd probably attribute, I guess, versatility more on that side where, you know, listen, you dedicate so much time to it. You want to be successful. You know, I look at my, you know, my tenure at Duke, we had a really great team. I mean, you're talking about great teams. I mean, you know, my career, 4 Final Fours, 2 ACC championships, and a national championship my sophomore year. So, you know, it's pretty humbling to have that because, you know, most people don't even get to even experience a Final Four.
That's awesome. And, you know, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about that game winner in the national championship that gave Duke its first ever championship. What was going through your head when you won that cleanly and took it down the field? Obviously, you said you were glad Coach didn't call a timeout there, but what was going through your head?
Oof. You know, I mean, honestly, it's funny you say that. So, like, you know, if you kind of really want to dissect it a little bit, you know, I look at it from, I remember I was, so call it again, I wasn't taking the main draws. I wasn't taking the opening face-off. Sam Payton, who was our captain, and he was a freak athlete, he's an absolute stud, was kind of the guy. And then, you know, in the face-off game, I mean, as a lot of folks know, I mean, it's a battle of rock, paper, scissors, shoe, right?
Yeah.
So certain guys beat certain guys, you know, where maybe I beat one guy, and then all of a sudden I have trouble with this guy, but then the guy who I beat can actually beat the other guy. And, you know, I mean, granted, there wasn't a lot of face-offs in that game. I always tell people it's funny. Like, my favorite game I've ever been a part of in my life was the semifinal game when we played Virginia, where we ended up winning by a goal 14-3. That was by far my favorite game I've ever been. Whereas you go to the kind of, you know, when we played Notre Dame, I mean, it's 6-5. It was a defensive fest. It's a snooze fest in terms of a spectator game. But, you know, kind of, you know, they would put me out there as kind of being the hot hand. And I remember kind of like call it with, like, say, about 10, 12 seconds left in the fourth quarter. You know, you look at what Scotty Rogers was able to do. I mean, he stood on his head. I mean, the amount of crease saves that guy made with his tree trunk of legs was just absolutely outrageous. And, you know, so I'm sitting there, I remember like 12 seconds or so left, we have the ball. And I remember just kind of like sitting on the bench, just like, all right, like, listen, you got to, you know, not mentally prepare, but in a sense, just get ready for this, you know. And I remember, like, Coach Gabbs, who was our defensive coordinator at the time, came over, just kind of, like, patted me on the shoulder and kind of, like, moved on. And, like, you know, I heard the whistle blow. And I wasn't watching any of this last 12 seconds. I remember just kind of sitting there, just, like, in my hands, just thinking, like, all right, listen, here's the deal. Like, just win the ball. Like, you have a lot of great athletes on, you know, great offensive guys. Get them the ball and just get them the best shot and opportunity so that we can win this thing in overtime. And I remember kind of sitting there and you kind of like when I was on the bench, because obviously the guys are blocking the view of the stadium, of the field, and you're sitting there and you're just like, all right, I'm just waiting to hear something. Like, meaning like, you know, cheers of some sort, like, oh, something going in. Obviously nothing, you know, clock went down to 0. No one came out. So then I was like, all right, like, this is it. So we're going into overtime. And literally, like I said, the biggest thing that I was looking at doing was just be like, all right, let me get the ball for our guys. That was it. You know, you don't want to, like, and the thing is, like, you know, it's interesting because you play in front of, like, 40 people. And obviously in the NFL stadiums, you play anywhere between, say, 30 to 55,000 people on championship weekend. But the field dimensions are the same. The rules are the same. So, like, you know, the idea to kind of go out there and just be like, all right, just do what you do and kind of go from there. And, you know, I remember kind of referees kind of go in there, you know, give a kind of whole spiel, you know, down, set, whistle. And what I'm big at was jamming. So basically the idea is that just violently punch your left hand through your opponent's stick so that they cannot clamp down onto the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I ended up jamming him, and I felt like I was much quicker on the whistle than he was. And the ball was kind of there up front. So what I do is I'd take the stick, push it kind of through, and then basically now had a ground ball opportunity where I was able to pick it up on my own. And what I think a lot of people don't realize, too, is the face-off game is not just about the two guys who are, down on the ground, right? It's really a 3-on-3 battle.
Mm-hmm.
And I find, even like now, what I'm very amazed at in the pro rankings is just how little wing play is really taught. Because at Duke, what we were really focused on is boxing out, right? The idea is that you don't want, you want to box out and make sure that those wing guys cannot affect the face-off. And I don't think of anyone else who did it any better than was at Duke. I mean, that was really instilled into us, right? So it's not a one-on-one battle, but a 3-on-3 battle. And, I bring that up because I remember picking up this ball, and all of a sudden I'm like, I got an open lane here.
Mm-hmm.
So I pick it up, and I'm running. And, I look at kind of like left and right, and I don't see anyone my guys are doing a great job boxing out, giving me a lane. And what's great also about these NFL stadiums is that you have lines, right? So you kind of know where you are on the field.
Mm-hmm.
So you know that the GLE is at the 10-yard line. And then in M&T Bank, where the game was, you know that the 20-yard line has those purple kind of outer lines on it. Designate that, meaning that you're basically 10 yards from the goal at that point.
Sure.
So I remember running and all right, you're waiting for the slide here. And, 100% where it's going to come from. But I'm running, and, it's very interesting, especially times when games in overtime, right? And, you look at it where guys don't want to be the fall guy. Meaning, people have a tough time sliding because, it's like, I don't want my guy to be the one who scored because then it's my fault. But at the same time, it's a 4-on-3 break. Like, someone's got to pick up ball.
Mm-hmm.
But, the way I look at it, my sophomore year, I got hurt early. I started kind of finally feeling more back healthy in my towards playoff time, actually. But, if I'm running down the field, I just remember running. I'm like, all right, I'm going to look to pass it off. Who's going to be opening? Ned's going to be there. I can throw it to Ned. That's going to be fine. Or I did like throwing a lot of times cross, to say that righty shooter. So Zach Howell. But at the same time, if I'm Notre Dame, right, my game plan would probably be let me shoot, right? If you think about it, it's like, all right, you got Ned Crotty, who's going to win the Torton that year. You got Zach Howell, who I think was a 50-plus goal scorer that year. And on the left-hand side, you got Max Quinzani.
Mm-hmm.
And Max was 1 goal shy of 200 career goals.
And he put the team on his back, too, in that semifinal game, essentially.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That great cover shot that he had of him. So, of those 4, then you got me, the sophomore kid. Who are you gonna with the long pole? Who are you gonna let shoot the ball? So I just remember running down the field, and as soon as I hit that purple line, I was like, all right, no one slid to me. I'm gonna kind of let this thing fly. And it's funny because especially the long pole, the biggest thing you worry about is trail checks.
Mm-hmm.
So when I run through the field, you make sure that I basically have my stick up in front of myself, and you want to keep it really high, right? Because you want to keep the angle so that it's very difficult for the goalie to track.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're taught as a defenseman is you want to shoot for upper corners, right? So the idea here is that if you miss, at least you can just get it back up, no problem. Because the worst thing in the world is when you run transition, you hit the goalie in the stick, right, and it's popcorn going the other way. Because then you got to get on your horse, tired. It's just the worst experience. And then if they score, then you feel like even worse. Like it's kind of a 2-goal swing, so to speak. I remember kind of just shooting kind of as high as possible. And I remember I shot it falling down, and basically where the ball and I remember just sitting there. I kind of slid. And I just remember watching, and the scouting report for us was to shoot low on Scotty Rogers, who was the goalie for Notre Dame, and I just remember seeing him just go low, all I remember seeing is the back of the net just kind of move. Or basically, it seemed like where the ball went, where his head would have been if he didn't kind of guess low a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I remember seeing the net move, and the first it was, and all of a sudden you just sit there and I see the net move, and I'm just like, wow, you kind of takes kind of a second to digest, and
sure.
I didn't hear any of the crowd, any of that. So what I ended up hearing though was I just remember hearing Max Quinzani, so on my right side, and I just hear him say, "Oh my God!" But as his voice cracks like he just went through puberty. I'm just like, oh my God, this is it. This is over. I remember just grabbing him and like just hugging him. And, you know, you sit there, you're hugging, and like, you know, Zach and Ed, and all of a sudden, like, next thing you know, the whole team's kind of like dog pile rush, and then you're at the bottom of this pile. And, you know, you're sitting there and you're getting absolutely crushed. Like, you can't breathe. Steve Shuffle was the mini for us. You know, his helmet came off. I remember Zach's like literally trying to cradle his head so that he doesn't, like, you know, so his head doesn't get crushed. And I remember sitting there just like, you know, I'm sitting there like, just like, I can't breathe, but I was just so happy that I did not care in the least. Like, I sat there and just like, wow, this is it. Like, I mean, you're talking about, I mean, that's the goal. I mean, that's like the pinnacle of it all in terms of lacrosse, is to win on that weekend, to have a moment on that. And then, you know, what people don't realize is, I mean, your season starts in August.
Yep.
Right? You have a fall season. I mean, like, you know, you run and lift, you play lacrosse, you get up at 6, 7 o'clock a.m. in the morning at Duke, and you practice a couple hours and you go to class. Like, people don't see all that, all the hard work that goes into it. And then, I mean, you're spending a couple hours playing, and let alone, oh my God, Matt, if you get hurt, you're spending like 5 or 6 hours, you know, at the Murray building, in our case, you know, getting healthy and getting prepared. So to have, you know, I mean, that all that emotion just comes, it just all comes to the top. And then, like, you know, obviously you look at what some of those guys went through in 2006, and the kind of, you know, you don't always necessarily get storybook endings. And, like, you know, I'm very fortunate to have that moment for those guys. And, you know, it was just, you know, it was just honestly, like, it was just surreal. Like, again, like, you sit there and, like, I mean, that's, to me, the equivalent of, you know, in the World Series, you know, bases loaded, Game 7, you know, you're up at deck and you hit a grand slam to win, like, it's very, very humbling, to say the least. And, you know, I always sit there and, like, wow, like, I peaked my sophomore year in college. Like, I don't know where it goes up from there. But, it's a pretty good moment, to say the least. And I'm just very fortunate to obviously share it with my teammates as well. So, yeah, no, definitely. I don't know. I don't really think about it too much anymore. I'm getting older, but it kind of brings back a little chill sometimes when I talk about it. So, no, appreciate that, guys.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. I mean, I remember watching it. I nearly missed it because I was watching the whole game, and I was like, all right, they're going to overtime. Like, let me go like get some food or whatever. I was at my cousin's house, and I remember like walking down and just seeing you win the face-off and you score. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's it. They just won it. What grade was I in? I was in high school then. So yeah, for me, it was like, that's kind of what, you know, I ended up playing in college at the D3 level, and, you know, Adam did as well. But that ended up being kind of like, that's what you always aspired to. You know, you wanted to play on championship weekend. You wanted that moment. And, you know, I don't know. It was just awesome to watch. And it's great hearing you kind of recount that story because, you know, it's kind of nice to see, like, you know, me and Adam both witnessed it from a fan's perspective, but now to hear, you know, behind the scenes, like, what was going through your head, it's awesome. So I appreciate you recounting that story.
It's cool. I mean, you hear a lot of cool stories from people. I mean, like, it's funny, like, so Brendan Fowler, I consider one of my, you know, really good friends. You know, obviously he had a great career at Duke and you know, figured it out. You know, he was actually going to go to Duke to play football solely. And he flat out told me, he's like, dude, I saw you do that weekend. And I was like, dude, that looks kind of cool. I want to try to do that. And lo and behold, you know, he took the torch on, and I mean, he crushed it.
He certainly did.
2014. So, yeah, no, cool nonetheless to hear those stories too.
Yep. No, absolutely. But, you know, let's shift gears a little bit to the pro game. You know, we'll get to the MLL Championship in a little bit, but let's first start off. You know, you were drafted by the Bayhawks in 2012. You were traded to the Lizards for 2 seasons before being traded back. And we'll talk about that too because, you know, you saw the Bayhawks team that drafted you win it in 2013, went over to the Lizards, got traded back to the Bayhawks, and the Lizards team you were just with won it in 2015. So what was it like, you know, finally coming back to the Bayhawks organization, and then, you know, how's it been playing for this historic franchise, you know, in professional lacrosse?
Yeah, no, so it's funny. I mean, it's funny you bring up kind of like the initial draft, obviously getting drafted by the Bayhawks and getting traded immediately to Long Island. It's funny because I remember I was still in college and we were still going to the tournament. I remember I just like got a call from my pops, and like it was like called like 9 o'clock. I forget what day it was, like 8 a.m. And he's like, hey, like, I mean, yeah, I was college. I'm like, that's early to me. You say like, hey, like you up? Like, no, what's going on? You see this? I go, no, what are you talking about? You got traded, right? I go, no one told me. All right, I guess I'm going to play in New York. And I mean, I was planning to move to New York anyway, so it made sense. I was fine with it. Enjoyed my time in New York. And then, sometimes kind of things, the pro game is very interesting because you have to be self-motivated. And I think I didn't do a great job of doing that initially. For the kind of like say first kind of call it not my first year out, but like it gets very difficult. Like you see a lot of guys go through a sophomore slump, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you're on your own, right? Because you practice once a week on a Friday, you play on Saturdays, and for me, coming out of college, I didn't want to make my life about lacrosse.
Mm-hmm.
I still have a passion for it, but when I was coming out, you really didn't have a lot of guys full time in the sport. Like if you look at kind of the breakdown, the MLL, right, the demographics, like guys were professionals in some capacity or other, whether, they had other jobs outside of lacrosse, where kind of if I flash forward to today, like myself, being someone who works in the financial industry is an anomaly. Like I look at like a Matt Abbott, for example, being a financial advisor, that's an anomaly, like, which is very cool and it's beneficial for the sport in terms of growth, is that you guys have, now there's people who are full-time in the sport of lacrosse.
Mm-hmm.
In some capacity. Like you're not making a living obviously on your contract in terms of professional contract, but at the same time as you're coaching high school, college, you're doing private lessons, you have summer teams, what have you will. So I think that's obviously, beneficial for the sport kind of moving forward. But, in terms of kind of bouncing around, I mean, especially the fact that you're missing out on these championships, it definitely, I mean, it plays a little bit with you because you're like, damn, am I like a cancer or something? Like what's going on? And, it's just kind of sometimes how it kind of, cookie crumbles, so to speak. It is what it is. But, I can't foresee myself being somewhere in the MLL outside of the Bayhawks. I grew up in New York, Connecticut, Northeast lacrosse guy. There's always the battle between the North and the South in terms of who produces the best lacrosse players. Mm-hmm. I have a love-hate relationship with, Maryland. That's how I got recruited, M&T Bank. And, the one thing that I really appreciate about Maryland as a whole, and especially the Bayhawks, is that, in the Northeast, when you go to a lacrosse event, right, the only time you ever see lacrosse, like people wearing lacrosse gear or, T-shirts, jackets, what have you will, is really around lacrosse events.
Sure.
It's tournament games, what have you will, right? Whereas if you look at, for example, like in Maryland, which I find very cool and interesting, is that you see it all around. Like it's a part of the DNA of the culture, particularly in Annapolis.
Mm-hmm.
Which I find very, very unique. Like people like in Annapolis, like they know who you are,
mm-hmm.
which is kind of cool in a sense. You have like a responsibility, and to me, being a part of the Chesapeake Bayhawks, you really have a connection to Annapolis, Maryland as a whole, which again, I've never seen that or never experienced that in the sport of lacrosse in the professional rankings, which I think is very, very cool. And, I think it comes down from the top, like our owner, Brendan Kelly, or BK as we call it. I mean, he's very passionate. He's not doing this for the money by any stretch of the imagination. He does it for the love of the game.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that he's trying to, create the first fully dedicated professional lacrosse stadium, I think shows you how his passion and drive really is. And, I think that really gets, passed down across the whole organization, especially the team. I mean, at the end of the day, chemistry what really makes it, right? It's very easy to build chemistry when you're doing everything with somebody, like in the college rankings, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's very, very hard, though, to do that in the pro league, especially because you practice on Fridays, you play on Saturdays. So it's very, very consolidated, and guys are at different stages in life. But, the closeness of this group, I think, is tremendous. And, again, I think the fact that how many guys you've had that have been there for multiple year periods really speaks volumes to the organization and how it's run. So it's been great, to say the least.
That's great. I mean, it's, I think it's often overlooked too, like being the hometown team, especially in a hotbed like, the Maryland area it's unique. And I think you hit the nail on the head with that.
So let's go a little bit into a couple weeks ago and winning that championship. What was that experience like being in Denver and finally hoisting that Steinfeld Cup?
I will say this. Winning is the funnest thing in the world. This league's tough to you. You give up your summers, right? And, you look at kind of our track record, a couple of times of not qualifying for the playoffs. I even look at my first year, actually, take a step back with the Lizards. And we were up by like 10 goals at halftime on Denver. And I actually ended up dislocating my big toe. I remember that now, which I never knew was actually possible, but that was fun. But we were up by 10 goals and we ended up losing that game. So it kind of gave winning's fun, right? Last time I actually, again, you look at these tournaments, right? There's only one team that ends up, with a winning record or with a W at the end of it, right? And you want to be that team. I look at last year where we were we were short by one goal. We played the Denver Outlaws in the semis. Unfortunately, Stephen Kelly went down the game before with a knee. And I kind of had to step up and take faceoffs. And, unfortunately, we were just one goal shy from kind of moving on to the next, to the finals that year. But, this year, I look at it from, you had guys who were very upset last year, how it shook down. We were very fortunate enough to return a lot of the same guys, especially the core individuals. Mm-hmm. And we also ended up rounding it out with some youth from our hat up north from Canada. Mm-hmm. And, again, I think we all meshed very, very well. And, having it out in Denver was very cool experience, and especially at the stadiums, like the soccer stadium is very cool because, again, I think it makes more sense based on terms of the number of lacrosse fans that come out. Sometimes these NFL stadiums can be a little big. And, it's funny, though, because obviously we were the number one seed. At the same time, we were by no means the home team. We were definitely outnumbered heavily by the orange and black fanhood. But at the same time, we thrived on that. And, that really got us excited. We battled them for a lot. The way the schedule is kind of structured, a little kind of screwy in a sense. We played Denver 4 times, although obviously the last time was a little unique because you had kind of different rosters because guys had commitments to their countries in the World Indoor Games. Mm-hmm. Realistically, we played them, I'd say kind of 3 times where you had kind of what your roster expectations would be. And it's funny because, I remember when we went up 5-0, we were all pretty excited and I'm like sitting there, I'm like, these games are about ebbs and flows. Mm-hmm. And I'm sitting there in the back of my head, and I didn't bring it up, but I'm sitting there thinking about my rookie year, I've seen teams give up 10-goal leads. This is kind of nothing. And then, you're sitting there, and we're firing all cylinders because, we have a lot of great competitors. And, the one thing that was always frustrating, I think, us as a team as a whole throughout the year for the Bayhawks was that we always felt we had the pieces to win a championship. The thing was that we just never put a game together for 60 minutes. Mm-hmm. There was always some sort of lull. Whether, we started down by 4 goals in the first, or we were down by 6 at half. And then all of a sudden the defense, we would hold the team to 1 or 2 goals for the next 30 minutes. So it was always frustrating. We're all of a sudden we're finally clicking, we punched in the mouth, we're going. These guys are starting to go after one another. And, at halftime, everything's kind of looking pretty good. And all of a sudden, we just went on this, a drought. And, I got to believe it was almost 30 minutes of not scoring, which you're sitting there and, everyone's kind of looking, watching the score kind of change. Denver, another one. You're sitting there all right, here we go. And, you don't want to have a kind of division between your offense and defense, but, as defensemen, we're sitting there a little bit all right, guys, come on, at least just bury one. Let's stop the bleeding here. And I don't think we did a good job helping Kenny Massa, the face-off X from the wings. They started getting some ground balls from the wings. And all of a sudden you're oh, my God, did we just blow this again? And then obviously, Steele's been a stud all year. He's a stud, obviously, in the Atlanta game, which, again, had a lot of ups and downs as well. Mm-hmm. Put in the net. And then it was very strange in the sense of just, it was very strange in the regards that I never seen a team implode as much kind of towards the end of it. And with Denver, if you look at it, Steele was clearly on the ground, and all of a sudden, you can make arguments. I haven't really watched in terms of whether or not he actually hit Wardo, whatever you will, but dude, the guy literally, Steele was on the ground, literally just cross-checked in the back. That's obviously going to draw a flag. It's a dead ball flag foul. I can't. I'm very perplexed on if you don't really see that but that obviously definitely happened. And then, obviously that now in turn, instead of getting a face-off, now you have, us getting the ball, and then rookie Andrew Q there just, buried one. And then obviously, they ended up going man down further. But at the same time, it doesn't take away from it. I mean, you look at this season and how long it is and how much sacrifice is really made. I mean, it's a 16-game season. We started, call it in May with training camp. You play all the way out to October. And I talked to the guys, I'm trying to think of the last time I played lacrosse in October outside of, fall ball. I had the privilege of kind of trying out for the USA team before for the field game in the past. But, I'm just trying to think of actually was playing outdoor lacrosse where you're worried about, 40, 50-degree weather, so to speak. But, winning, you sit there and you kind of, wonder, why am I giving my summers? Why am I doing all this? And then all of a sudden, once you hoist that cup, you're like, yeah, I know why I'm doing it. So, it's, sit there and have a drought for, say, call it 9 years. It's tough. I probably was a little cranky, kind of demanding of myself. I think, finally getting that kind of having that one is pretty tremendous, especially as you guys alluded to. Thanks, guys. Missed out on a couple opportunities prior to.
Sorry.
The other day, finally got one, which is great. And, to celebrate it with the group of guys that we've had is also, I think, very, very unique. So, it's been, it's honestly, it's pretty surreal. I mean, the group chat that we have going on, guys, it just makes you happier, man. Just put a little pep in your step in all aspects of life. I don't really know how to describe it. May not be in the best, using my verbiage right now, but it's just, it's awesome, man. That's what you do this for. And to be able to compete at the highest level, college, playing the MLL professionally, compete with, it's really, really cool to say the least.
It's awesome. I'm sure it's really fulfilling, and that's kind of why we brought up about how, how many times you kind of missed out on it, and to finally get that, because I'm sure you'd been kind of starving for that since you won it with Duke in 2010. So I think kudos to you for you and the team getting it done, and you deserve it.
Oh, thank you guys, appreciate that. Yeah, you definitely, the group definitely does.
Well, with that, we're gonna take a quick break, and then we'll get into our 5 and 5 segment, learn a little bit more about you, on the lacrosse field, but also off the field as well. Hey everyone, thank you for listening to another episode of the Pro Lacrosse Talk podcast. We've been using Anchor for our podcast since the very start. Anchor gives you everything you need in one place, and better yet, it's free. They allow you to easily record and edit your podcast so it sounds great and send it out to all the major networks such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and many more. Better yet, they connect you with advertisers so you can start making money from your podcast right away. So if you're interested in starting a podcast, download the Anchor app today or go to anchor.fm to get started. Today's show is being brought to you in part by Stitcher Premium. You can use Stitcher Premium to listen to shows ad-free such as Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend, My Favorite Murder, Wolverine the Lost Trail, or our favorite, The Fantasy Footballers. For only $4.99 a month or $34.99 a year, you get access to Stitcher Originals, bonus episodes, and comedy albums. Better yet, if you go over to Stitcher.com/premium and use the promo code lacrosse today, you can get 1 month free. So head on over to Stitcher, sign up, and get your free trial today. Welcome back. Let's dive into our 5 and 5. I'll start with the lacrosse questions first, CJ. Number one, what are some pregame superstitions or routines that you have?
So I've kind of gotten a little bit away from it, but I'll give you kind of my high school, college. So I had a playlist that I always used to listen to that would encompass a mix between kind of techno and some rap music. Eminem was a staple. Limp Bizkit, DMX, 50 Cent, Getting Rich
Some great ones.
It was a relatively new album, Life's on the Line, Go to Sleep by Eminem, The Way I Am, and then I was also very silent in terms of kind of warming up, just kind of really focused, lasered in, face-off aspect of it, where you just kind of like isolate, get yourself really focused, dive into the game. I was always very particular on how I kind of put my pads on, always, a certain way each kind of time. And at the same time, though, the big thing you got to realize is that you don't want to get too jacked up too soon. It's not like you're bumping pump up music 2-3 hours beforehand because right then your adrenaline's going to wear off by game time.
Mm-hmm.
I actually used to listen to about 2 hours prior to, like, very, like, kind of soft jam. So, like, Third Eye Blind, like, Sugar Cult, Aqualung, like, just stuff that, like, Oasis, things that kind of keep you kind of in control and then obviously kind of ramp up prior to the game. And I also wouldn't really eat before games. Would eat very little, kind of keep a little bit hungry, kind of be a little hangry, if you will.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And then, yeah, I mean, those are kind of, I think, more my main rituals, so to speak. But, I mean, it's, you know, it's more preparation related, obviously, now than, you know, like, all right, you know, if I don't put my arm guard there on the right way, like, oh, my God, you're going to have a bad game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that you actually ended up knocking out the second question as well, because my second question was what was one of the top songs on your Gameday playlist. So I'm a big Eminem guy myself, too. I know it's like, it's kind of like cliche to say, but there's just something about, you know, his songs that kind of get you in the mood, you know, go out and play. But so that was question 2. So I'll move on to question 3. Who's a lacrosse player you looked up to when you were younger and tried to emulate?
So you know what? It's interesting because what I did was I honestly took a mixture of players' styles and kind of equated it to my game. And it's interesting because, like, I mean, nowadays I think kids are, I mean, private lessons are very, very big. Like back when I was going through the process, right, developmental camps were big. So, like, you know, the local first guy who I really learned from is a guy named by the name of Dan DiPietro. So Dan actually went to Hopkins for a year, or 2 years actually, and then played at Syracuse. He went to Brewster High School. And he was the first guy who actually seemed like really made it, and actually won a national championship in 2004 versus Navy. A guy like that. Another name would be of Ryan Mcclay. So Ryan Mcclay, like, so Dan was a mean kind of animal, just loved inflicting pain on people. Ryan was more of like a cerebral guy. So Ryan Mcclay, he played at Cornell, all-world defenseman. Actually, he was actually literally, I forget what year, but USA team member, multiple years. You know, was considered the best defenseman in the world. And he was just more like a finesse and cerebral guy. He was more like a surgeon, right? He wasn't a butcher. Kind of took elements in terms of regard from those guys. And then, like, you know, I mean, I always emulated guys like Brody Merrill. John Glatzel would be another name that I think should get thrown out there. Just in terms of, you know, guys who are just, you know, kind of legends in the sport, especially on the defensive end. Yeah,
no, that's awesome. A lot of those names are great. I was actually at that 2004 final. I was rooting for Navy because my dad went there, and I just remember that's kind of like another championship too that sticks out in my mind. That was close, you know, kind of like yours with Notre Dame and Duke. It was just down to the wire, and you know, Mikey Powell held scoreless till the very end to win it. So you know, that's another one that kind of sticks fresh in my mind. You're bringing me back, but yeah, those are some great names on that list. Number 4, what is your current lacrosse stick setup in terms of shaft, head, and stringing?
Yeah, so I'm fortunate enough to be, you know, kind of powered or sponsored by the best in Maverick. So I have a caliber shaft. Honestly, the lightest defensive shaft that I've ever used before. And then on top of it, have a Havoc for my head. And using Spring King setup. So I do, in terms of, you know, kind of, so originally I was actually using soft mesh this year. It was a poor decision because my point absolutely sank. However, really to hold on the ball was better, but I lost I think 10 miles an hour on my shot. I actually ended up switching it up right before our game against Denver. Or not the final game, but our end of the year game. I was finally I was able to finally score, but so I kind of used hard mesh. And, like, I remember Coach Cottle looked at me like, "You're like shooting way harder." I'm like, "Yeah, I know." Like, you know, so lessons learned on that. And then also I had kind of a gut string across, and then one hockey lace, and I also have a V. It's funny, actually, you can tell the difference in guys in terms of when they graduated based whether or not they have a V in their stick. The new guys don't have that anymore, but that's kind of the setup that I have on the stick.
No, it's funny you mentioned the V because I was a double V guy in high school, and then they changed the rules. They changed the rules in double V. Yeah, no, I had like way too much hold. I don't know if it helped or hurt me, but then they changed the rules in college, and it took me a while to kind of adapt. And you know, I ended up, you know, adapting, but it was funny because nowadays, like you said, like no one uses it. Like even like the youth, I mean, I think they still can if they want to, but there's just really no point because you're gonna have to change it eventually. But no, yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. But my final question for lacrosse is number 5. What has been your favorite venue to play lacrosse at?
Ooh, wow. So, all right, yeah, I know exactly what it is. So we're going to go to Klockner Stadium in Virginia.
Okay.
So it's so funny. I talked to Steele Stanwick about it because I love busting his chops a little bit because he's one of the nicest guys in the world. So what's always great at Duke was that we'd always be ranked number 1, number 2 in the country, start of the year. And, what makes Coach Janowski great is not his X's and O's, because every guy at that level is great at X's and O's.
Mm-hmm.
His ability to understand the journey, the highs and lows of that journey, and then ultimately put people in the right spots to make them successful in championship weekend is really what makes him different from, I think, a lot of coaches in Division I rankings. With that being said, though, is that, so generally speaking, what would happen at Duke, we would usually go like, say, 2-3 beginning of the year. Everyone else says Duke sucks. They're not good, overhyped. Mm-hmm. The beauty of it, too, is now Dino controls us because he's like, oh, the media has, said you guys suck. You guys suck. Blah, blah. But what's always interesting is that usually you kind of went 2-3. We would go on a pretty big run, and then we'd start ACC play. And, people always talk about kind of rivalries, what have you will. And, it was always funny because when we played Virginia, we always used to get excited for that game. And Virginia used to be always number 1 when we used to play them, I feel like. And I'm being honest, we used to go there, play them, whether it be in Koskinen in our place or Klockner. And, the environment in Klockner is very cool, right? Because you have the grass is probably the best manicure grass out there. You have people in the stands, people on the hill. You're packing this place 10,000 plus people. And it's just very on top of each other. You're in enemy territory. And, everyone's, oh, Virginia, the Cavaliers, this is the year, blah, blah, blah. And we used to go in there. And when I say, beat, I'm talking, absolutely embarrass them. It was literally, 4 or 5 plus goal games. And so, it's one of those things where we just absolutely, I don't know, we just always had a blast there, always, won and always kind of just play extra hard. So, in terms of, stadiums, I got to go Klockner, kind of sticking it to the Cavs.
I love it. That's great. No, that's a unique answer because, a lot of people, usually pick, their home stadium or whatever. Actually, a guy like Jake Bernhardt, though, he picked, he liked playing at Navy. He felt like he had his best games there, and necessarily. So sometimes it is the away venue. So yeah, I love that answer. That's great.
Yeah, no, that's a close second in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I look at that stadium just in terms of the history on it, the battles, the fact that I get to play my professional games there is really, really cool. And you even look at some of the college games that I played there. It's a very, very unique venue to say the least. It's cool. We're very fortunate to play in a lot of unique venues, but that's one that definitely sticks up there too. Is Navy Memorial Stadium.
Awesome. All right, Adam, you want to go with the life-related questions?
Yeah, absolutely. So first one, heading back to your Duke days, what was your favorite class while you were at Duke?
Ooh, my favorite class. Jesus, Adam, dude, I think that's almost, I'm graduating in 2012. Favorite class.
This one always trips the people up the most, to be honest with you, for the most part, because they're going back.
I'm really taking a stroll down memory lane here. I thought we didn't go to school for class. No. One of my early classes that was pretty interesting was I took a lot of cultural or evolutionary anthropology classes.
Okay.
Which was kind of interesting. I'm just trying to think of what I actually learned in those, but those were really, really cool. Took some good stuff on Crusades. I took an Israeli class on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as well, which was very, very, very interesting. I was a history major in college, so I did stuff on World War I, II, and II as well. But yeah, these cultural anthropology classes are very, very fascinating in terms of kind of evolution. You kind of look at different skeletons, see kind of the tracking, kind of humans evolved over time was pretty interesting.
Awesome. Little bit different than we'll head back to now. Okay. What are some hobbies and or activities that you enjoy doing when you're not playing lacrosse?
Yeah, I got to start learning some hobbies. On my to-do list is golf right now. It turns out a lot of people do it for business, but I'd say my biggest hobby is, so I travel a lot for work domestically, but one of my big things is I love traveling abroad. So I try to go to 3 to 5 countries each year. I'm very big on experiences. I love kind of going around and experiencing, different places to see how people live, meet different people from different backgrounds. I look at this year alone, went to Berlin, so actually Dublin, Ireland, to Kilkenny, Ireland, went to Berlin, Germany, Germany, Greece, went to Budapest, Hungary, went to Norway, was in Mexico actually last week. I've probably done about, say, 28, 29 countries.
That's great. Well, that kind of leads into my next question. I feel like you probably answered it already, but like, what's your ideal vacation? It seems like it's a lot of different things.
So I have the attention span of a gnat. I need to be moving. Like me sitting on a beach for, call it 3, 4, 5 days is just not feasible.
Mm-hmm.
What I try to do is when I travel a lot is I try to balance between, kind of do historical, kind of touristy things, like go to museums, also, culinary stuff, like try like local delicacies. There's certain lines I will draw, but, I'm pretty adventurous eater from that standpoint. And also experience kind of the nightlife aspect of it. I really believe there's I think some people have a tendency of waiting to travel much later in life, like when they're like 40, 50 plus, right? But that experience is going to be so much different. Where when you're, say, call it, I'm 29 now, but like, your experience when you travel these places where I want to see like all the cool culture aspects, but I also want to kind of experience the nightlife as well.
Sure.
So, I try to kind of balance that. Sometimes I do get a little overzealous where like I got to kind of wait, you have to sleep at some point, but, love kind of traveling, like, mixed groups, kind of bounce around. And generally speaking, I'm usually kind of the travel tour guide, so I do a lot of in-depth research on these places. Because it's interesting, like if you really look kind of like deep down and try to figure out how to travel places, there's not a lot of, I think, travel sites that are really geared towards kind of people in their late 20s, early 30s. Like where like they want to do all these cultural aspects at the same time. They also want to go out. Like, so you have to like really do a deep dive, talk to people, maybe if you have some people who are from there, get experiences to kind of do things as local. But like when I build out these itineraries, these Excel things, they're pretty extensive because you want to maximize your time, right? So you don't want to necessarily be, going from the east side of a city to the west, back to the east side, right? You want to be very efficient. So I try to maximize my time when I'm in these places.
I would say you sound like me when I don't travel nearly as much as you. I just took a trip, though, to New Zealand back in 2018, and there's just so much to do. I only got to go to the North Island, but I was like, all right, I'm going to stop at this city and this day. I was in a different, city each day because I wanted to, again, maximize my time. I got like a rental van. But, I think you're spot on with that, too, is a lot of people wait to travel. And I'm really glad that I kind of just, jumped into it. And I too did like a lot of research because like you said, it is, I went out to some bars and stuff and, it's not really geared towards, a younger traveler, so to speak, on some of these travel sites. So I don't know. That definitely resonates with me.
Yeah. Like going on TripAdvisor and seeing that the best restaurant's the Olive Garden, it's just not accessible.
Well, that perfectly kind of leads into my next question. You talked about being an adventurous eater a little bit. What's your favorite meal if you had to pick one? And I think I know the answer, but do you prefer to dine in, take out, or cook at home?
I travel a lot for work. I'm basically on the road, call it next 4 days. I'm in Columbus, Ohio right now, actually, going to Louisiana. Last week I was in Albany, Indianapolis, Bismarck, North Dakota, and prior to that I was in London. So cooking doesn't happen too much for me, unfortunately, which I want to learn because my parents are both excellent cooks. I was actually very spoiled. I thought everyone's parents were excellent cooks. Little did I realize that as I started talking and interacting with people. But in terms of during going out, so I grew up Italian, so pastas, like ravioli was always a go-to, meatballs. My dad was also a big steak guy, so steak. We used to do potato kind of baked chips that were really really good. You used to kind of crush them with crushed red pepper, so anything spicy. But I will say where my kind of palate has changed, because red meat absolutely kills you. If you're sitting there crushing 10 ounces of steak every night, red meat, you're just going to a food coma. So what I've actually really been big on now is fish a lot. So things like salmon, things like halibut, eating super healthy. Also, as you realize, so I never actually, when you come out of school, right, when you're in college and you're playing lacrosse, a couple hours a day running and lifting, right? You can eat whatever you want. You can eat McDonald's. You can go to Cookout, which is down south. It's the kind of fast food barbecue chain down in
good shakes.
Yeah, so okay, good, perfect. You're right. Sorry. So you sit there and you're you can eat this stuff no problem. Then I remember a year out of college where you're not working out as much, and also not that I got packed on a ton of lbs, but all of a sudden you kind of look at your hips a little bit and you're there's something hanging a little bit here. What's going on? You gotta all right, you know what? We gotta bacon, maybe turkey bacon. Quinoa all of a sudden, you're sitting there you 2 years ago would be wow, what are you doing? And then so you're kind of obviously you got to change your diet. So I've eaten much healthier, and it's actually amazing. I in terms of I think my body composition, I was always listen, I was fit in college, but now I'm, it's 80% of it's honestly actually legitimately eating. So I kind of avoid kind of junk food, all that. I think guess in terms of favorite, if I had to pick a favorite cuisine, so I'm an Italian snob when it comes to Italian food, and honestly you can do a lot of nice restaurants in New York City, but the unfortunate reality is when you grow up Italian, no one makes better Italian food than your mom. And
Agreed.
Right, you can go to a nice restaurant in the world, the meatballs are not going to taste the same because you didn't grow up on them. It's just the unfortunate reality of it. So I usually don't do Italian restaurants in New York City at all, or anywhere for that matter. But things like Thai food, for example, is where I kind of really figure out. Sushi is also kind of another big thing. I think I kind of staples upon in the diet today.
Awesome. And then kind of to wrap up the personal questions, what's a book on your bookshelf currently or that you have on the road that you'd recommend to a teammate or friend?
You're killing me, man.
I know.
Yeah, I'm trying to you really exposed me on this one. I'm trying to think the last time I read a book.
That's okay. No, that's fine. You're traveling
I'm
too much.
ingrained into my job, so I read a lot for my job.
Yep.
So
I completely understand that.
So a lot more kind of technology related stuff.
That's awesome.
In terms of kind of investments that I read. So kind of TechCrunch, and then kind of catch up on artificial intelligence, machine learning.
Yep.
Internet thing, 5G, kind of those things.
Awesome. No, that's great.
I got, that's a 2020 goal of mine to actually start finally sitting down and reading, because people give a lot of great suggestions.
Yeah.
And then the fact that I'm traveling constantly, it would make sense to kind of pick that up. So that's going to be a new and improved me.
There we go.
2020.
Me and Adam are big on audiobooks. I honestly don't think I've read a book cover to cover in probably since high school. But the audiobooks are always a good way for me, and I still consider it reading. Obviously, I think it's better maybe to read actual book, but you still get the information, and I don't know. I feel like I can breeze through books a lot quicker if I'm listening to it. But I don't know. That's just my 2 cents.
That point to know, I appreciate. So my biggest thing is I got to start. So I'm saying, what do you guys?
Yep.
You guys Amazon here, Google, where do you start on this process?
Funny enough, if you go to your local library, now I'm going to sound like a real nerd about this, but if you go to your library, they actually have free apps that you can get a bunch of audiobooks that way. So I don't even really pay for any of them. There's 2 apps that I have on my phone. I haven't been to the library in, again, probably 3 years, but I can just download. You just hook up your information to the account, and then you can just download audiobooks, and usually they have everything you kind of need. Maybe not the new releases, but for the most part, the classics. And anything from self-help books to, business books to nonfiction to fiction, they'll have everything.
Interesting. All right. Yeah, no, because I really, that's on my to-do list. I really got to kind of get into that. And like to your point, I think like reading can be very tough just if you're on the go constantly. So I do think audiobooks. I have a tendency, like when I'm in transit, to listen to music more. Where I mean, it's all well and good, but at the same time, is you're really not necessarily growing.
And it rotates for me. I don't know about you, Adam. I'll listen to podcasts for like 3 months straight, and then I'll get sick of them. And then I'll go to music, and then I'll go to audiobooks. So I think it kind of it's good to kind of rotate through things too. But I don't know. So that's just me.
Wonderful. I appreciate that.
Yeah. No, of course. Well, let's get one more piece of advice actually from you though. What is some advice that you have for a young player that's looking to one day play lacrosse professionally?
The biggest thing is, for me, it was always about playing. Where I think people get very focused on is private lessons. Like, obviously, you have to have the mechanics and the fundamentals. And a big portion of that is obviously driven through doing one-on-one lessons or small group settings. But to me, what I felt like got me to be successful was always playing. Like, I was a mercenary for hire, and that was very well known. Where if someone at a tournament, like, hey, like, we only have 9 kids showing up, can you play? Or like, say we were going up to like indoor and like there's a game, I played and like the team following, like, hey, we're missing somebody, can you anyone from you guys want to play? I would always play because at the end, like, lacrosse is not rigid like football, right? Where like football is like, if this happens, you do this, but if this happens, then you do that, right? It's kind of like I almost equate a little bit soccer, kind of like a beautiful game where there's a lot of free flow. And you got to play to have different experiences and kind of challenge yourself how you're going to react to that, or like try different things through playing. And I think sometimes that gets lost with a lot of folks where they're just so focused on just private lessons, shooting 200 shots with someone fundamentally working on the mechanics constantly, almost like it's like golf, but like you just got to go out there and play. It's very different. It's a very different situation. Listen, anyone could shoot on the run, right? With no one on them. Like, how can you handle someone on your, stick on you, or like, how are you dodging someone so that you get your hands free? So like, those are the things that I think that I think's kind of forgotten a little bit. Guys really need to go out there and just play the game.
No, that's great advice. I think that's refreshing to hear too. In a day and age where we try to be so specialized and kind of narrow it down to a science. Sometimes it's more of an art, just going out and playing. But no, this has been great, CJ. We really appreciate you joining us. Where can people find you on social media online?
Social media game. So yeah, I have an Instagram at CJ9ER. So CJ9er would be the handle.
Awesome. No, again, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you coming on, and congrats again on a terrific season with Chesapeake and winning that MLL Championship.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, guys. Really appreciate the time.